The latest news poll is in, and it's not good news for the coalition. People have been talking about that all day. And if there was any doubt that an early election was off the cards, the very idea, to quote a former Liberal Prime Minister, is dead, buried and cremated. Instead, the government will use all the time that they have to try and right the listing ship of state. It is going to be a mighty task, and I suspect there are too few of the officers that they've got on deck that are actually really capable of doing their bit. Don't get me wrong, there are some really, really good ministers, men and women, that are more than capable of the role that they've been given. You'll be familiar with most of their names. You know, Frydenberg, Dutton, Cash, Hunt, Stoker is one of the new ones that's coming through. We could go on, there's quite a few others. But unfortunately, there are some duds there too. And it seems to me that some of them have been promoted to cabinet on the basis of either their biology or maybe even their religious beliefs rather than their ability. It's evidenced by the media presence of some of the ministers, or should I say, the lack thereof. For example, the first time I actually saw Karen Andrews in the media was last week, and she's been a minister for years. We've got Melissa Price, the reborn Minister for Defence Industry. She's been released from witness protection after her disastrous stint as Environment Minister, and she's now been put back into Cabinet. Now, I can think of 24 people better suited to that job. And what about the Minister for Employment? Who is that, I hear you ask? Well, that's actually my point. We face a jobs crisis, and few people know who the Minister in charge actually is. It's Stuart Robert, by the way. You see, once you get through the top 3 or 4 of the government, the rest don't seem to add that much value, and the government is suffering because of it. But it's not just what's happening in Canberra that's causing them pain. There's also a bit of pain being induced by the state premiers. You see, most of them have been sucking up the credit for the handling of the pandemic, while they sheet home the blame for any problems straight to the federal government and usually directly to the Prime Minister. Now, there's one exception to that, and it's happening in South Australia. It's also coincidentally the state where the federal government is actually doing the very worst. Today's news poll had them behind 45 to 55. That is a shellacking. Now, I'm not surprised by that because, quite frankly, and it pains me to say it, my home state of South Australia appears to be going nowhere. The state government is hopeless, and it's led by a premier with all the fight of a dead fish. After 3 years in government and 16 years to prepare for it, it's hard to name a single achievement of note. I mean, this mob can't even get themselves credited for the pandemic like the other state premiers, which is why they're neck and neck, or maybe even behind in the local polls too. And I actually think this is part of the reason the federal coalition is doing so badly in South Australia. You see, our citizens know their state is stagnating, and they really don't care who's responsible for it. But they will blame the most visible presence, or the most visible political presence, I perhaps should say, and that's actually the federal government. You see, the Premier, Stephen Marshall, is rarely seen, and when he is, it's either in a high-vis vest and a hard hat at some ludicrous campaign stunt, or he's hiding behind the health bureaucrat who appears to tell him what to do. And when he does do a press conference, he's got all the strength and conviction of a used tea bag. It is hardly the stuff of inspiration. So, Prime Minister, here's my message to you. If you want to improve your fortunes in South Australia, you need to inspire us that things will get better. You need to dump the current subs contract, and we need to have a fair dinkum local build that's realistic and affordable. You need to help our winemakers, our farmers and our fishers open up new markets. You've got to support business by encouraging them to build a baseload power plant that actually works properly. Here's a hint, it's going to use coal, and it will help make South Australia a competitive manufacturing state again. Yes, Prime Minister, I know these are usually the tasks of a state government, but the Liberal one installed here is only doing you damage.